Welcome to the Upstream Downlow. That's the new name of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers brand new podcast. This is our first edition of this. My name is Karr Ingham, and I am privileged to be the president of this organization, the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. And I don't know how you feel about that name, but we've got some really smart, creative, amusing comms folks, and they came up with that, and it made me chuckle. So there we are. That's the name of this podcast, and we'll use that going forward. We'll do this once a month or periodically, but again, this is our very first one, and I'm very pleased and honored to have as our first guest on the Upstream Downlow the chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission, Jim Wright. And Jim, first of all, welcome and thank you for doing this for me and for us today.
Oh, thank you, Karr, for having me on the first ever broadcast of this. This is really exciting and an honor to be here. I'm glad you guys called, and really look forward to this thing being a big success for the Texas Alliance and for the public. I think it provides a lot of information.
Appreciate that. Well, I've told this story many times. You've heard me tell it a couple of times. The first time you and I ever spoke was in March of 2020. The morning after the primary, in which you were the primary victor in this race for the Railroad Commission. It was right in the thick of COVID. It was a crazy time.
It was crazy.
And I have to say, Mr. Chairman, I don't know very many people that expected that outcome. I called you somehow or other. I got my hands on your cell phone, and I called you. You answered the phone, and my goodness, that morning when I assumed you were getting thousands of media calls, you talked to me for about 45 minutes, and I was honored by that. It was an interesting conversation, and that's how you and I began to get to know.
There was some things I was doing that day, and I hadn't even slept the night before, and it was something that I wanted to get out of. I didn't enjoy where I was that day. I remember it vividly. And that's probably the reason I was on the phone with you for 45 minutes, because I don't want to go back into it.
Well, I'll just take that for what it's worth. But it was great, and I really was appreciative of the time. What made you decide to do that? Why did you run for the Texas Railroad Commission in 2020?
You know, Karr, I started my first environmental service company in 1991 and grew that into about 4 different corporations, and it's still small mom and pop companies. But, you know, when I started, we did a lot of work for the refineries and for utilities. And then we discovered the shale, which I know you remember vividly.
Oh, yes.
And naturally, we started tracking the shale because that's where the money was at. And, you know, I got to where I had a lot of producers calling because they knew my experience in the environmental business. And they were asking me, hey, can you help me out with that commission? We're having some issues on some permits and other things that we're trying to do there. So I was exposed to, 4 or 5 years of really dealing with a commission almost on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things I was starting to recognize is we weren't getting really great consistency in how the rules were being applied. And so I actually started a task force that was made up of oil and gas producers, some attorneys and engineers, to where we wanted to assist the commission to write some guidance documents so that there would be more consistency in the way that the rules were being applied. We didn't get a very warm response with that at the commission, so that task force said, hey, why don't you run for railroad commissioner? And I said, why don't y'all jump off a really tall bridge with no water at the bottom? And it took a long time for me to think about that, but I thought, we've got a really huge opportunity for Texas in the shale revolution. We need to get consistency in this. We're going to have to do better planning moving through this future. This is not going to be a good thing for Texas. So, thinking about that to myself, it was the 3rd day before the deadline that I thought, oh, okay, I'll try. I've never been in politics before in my life, and I'll go to the commission and do what I can to make sure that we do things right, given the circumstances that we were in. That was, of course, in 2019. We'd already been experiencing a lot of things, and then that's what led me to really run for this office.
Well, so I know a lot of smart people that have run for office with ideas about things they wanted to get done, and when they get there, they find out that there's resistance. There's a lot of constituencies out there. You've got your fellow commissioners, you've got the staff, you've got oil and gas companies of all shapes and sizes, you've got the legislature, for crying out loud. Was this a tougher slog than you anticipated when you
You know,
took office?
I guess I'm like a lot of other people when I first ran for this office that felt like I could come in and as a railroad commissioner, I could just convince my other two commissioners that we could do anything we wanted to do, not really realizing that it's mostly led by legislative action. And I think that's where a lot of people get a little bit confused on what the railroad commissioners can actually do and not do, because it sure hit me head on. You know, when I came to this office, I was just a normal guy aspiring, to make good changes there. I wasn't a politician, and I still don't consider myself a politician today. I I think that as we look again at the future, if people need to really realize what the commission does and what I think the biggest role there is, and what I believe is this commission is developed to go in and defend the biggest industry in the state, which is, we're blessed with those natural resources in the oil and gas industry. We fight that pendulum of politics as politics swing to keep consistency in what we're trying to accomplish here in Texas. That's what I see the commission's biggest role being, and it's unique because it's an elected position, unlike any other state agencies, really, and like anything else in the world. So, I think if people would understand that more and figure out exactly where we can and where we can't, I think that's a thing we got to continue to improve on in the future, is to get the public to understand that.
Well, that's the question I was getting ready to ask. This is the principal job of the commission, is to regulate the oil and gas industry in Texas. That said, it is a statewide elected office. When you stand for election, every voter in Texas gets to cast a ballot. It's not just the oil and gas guys. And so getting the public to understand the principal mission of the Railroad Commission, even in Texas, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I have a great sense as to what the level of understanding is. But here it is, 2026. You're on the ballot again. Re-election comes now, primary now, general election in fall. And this kind of engagement and understanding on the part of the broader electorate in terms of what the commission does, how do you accomplish this?
It's a job, and again, the way I view this is we try to defend those industries we regulate, and we regulate those industries so that we do things that are safe and good things that are good for our land here in Texas. That's the mission to me, is to make sure that we're out there, and whatever the politics may end up being around those industries that we regulate, that we defend that. We're consistent with that. We stay with what is successful. A lot of people don't realize, but the oil and gas industry just last year was over $27 billion in tax revenue for our state. That's 1/3 of our economy on a yearly basis. That's a big number. So it's, if you look at what is good for Texas, again, this is the most important thing there is. And I think a lot of people look at it that there's things that you can just arbitrarily do as three commissioners, and there's a lot more to it than that. It's a big job to try to lead the legislation in a direction that's good for the success of those industries that we regulate, good for Texas in regards to safety and our land protection and all those things. So I think it takes people with a vision to look out and see what's coming down the road, and make sure it doesn't run over us. Make sure we have the ability to go around it and do it the right way.
It seems to me that there's a bigger spotlight on oil and gas in Texas just because of what that industry has accomplished here. I mean, not that many years ago, we were producing 1 million barrels a day in Texas. Now we're pushing 6 million barrels a day in Texas. That's extraordinary in again, not very long period of time, 15, 16 years, something like that. What does that look like from a public spotlight on the industry perspective and then a regulatory perspective?
Well, I think if you can kind of exaggerate on or really highlight what that is, you said it. We were producing somewhere around 1 million barrels a day, and that wasn't that many years ago. It hasn't been but just a few years, and we've moved all the way to almost 6 million barrels a day. So the growing pains in that has been tremendous, and I think that we, and when I say we, the industry has done an incredible job of mitigating the issues that we've had in those growth pains. That's always been my vision for this is let's stay out in front of it. Let's stay responsible. And I can tell you that the industry, especially from the smaller producer side, has really, really made a huge difference. I mean, just the vision that they have and the vision of, hey, how do we stay successful? How do we remain profitable so that we can continue this great thing that we're doing in Texas? Those are all the things that I get different smaller guys in particular that come to me and say, hey, this would help. This would help, and this is how it would benefit Texas. And when I say Texas, that's all the landowners and everybody that lives in the state.
Well, again, a bigger spotlight on the industry and the the things that may come out of that. I mean, everything's bigger. There's more produced water. There are more wells. There's more everything. We've had a long, healthy discussion with you about we just call it Chapter 4, but it's the waste management rewrite. And this hits operators of all sizes because you've got smaller guys with what we call Schedule A pits, just smaller stuff, and then you've got larger commercial and produced water recycling pits and such. What was your thought process? You were the driving force behind this, and it does require some of the smaller guys to do things that they had not done before. What was your driving thought about getting that Chapter 4 rewrite, that section of the manual redone?
Well, as we kind of mentioned earlier, we're going through a lot of growing pains now, and we actually jumped into a new revelation kind of in the oil and gas industry. We used to just drill normal, straight down vertical wells, and when you say we discovered the shale, it was actually horizontal fracking that we discovered that allows us to go into different formations. It's a whole new way of drilling, so it brought a whole new issues of that came with that success. About what impacts we were really making, and I stay concerned about the way we do it safely, and the impacts that we're leaving on our environment, and that really was important for me to try to get out and stay ahead of that, because if we don't stay ahead of that, it's going to run over us, and which means that it's going to be really detrimental to the success that we've seen in the oil and gas industry. So that's what drove those changes that I wanted to make there, and I can tell you. I had, I don't know how many meetings with a lot of industry, a lot of just public public on, how should this rule really be laid out and how should we change it? I think we did a good job. I think we've come a long way with our waste management rules or our environmental rules in the form that we can kind of stay ahead of anything that may be coming down the pike. When I want to talk about the pendulum of politics swing, just look at the Biden administration as an example. I can tell you that getting calls from the EPA back then saying, hey, we're going to pull your Class 2 injection authority. We're going to overview it, and we don't think you're handling that right. Their mission back then was to shut down the oil and gas industry. People don't realize that. There was no other mission there. It was shut down fossil fuel use, period. And anything they could do to do that, whether they could make it up or whatever they could do. So I felt like we've got to get ahead of that, because that can happen again. Another Biden administration can be elected back into the office. We need to get public confidence, and we need to get public support. And that's what I felt like we need to probably face first is what is our environmental, what are people concerned about in that? And how can we mitigate that concern so that we get more support pushing behind the oil and gas industry?
One thing that you had to deal with as a commissioner was Winter Storm Uri in 2021. Happened right after the legislature went into session, just upended Austin, Texas, upended the building over there, and maybe the commission. I mean, it was just such a rare event, but such a catastrophic event. As you and I are recording this today, we're just on the tail end of another really, not catastrophic, thank goodness, but another difficult polar vortex kind of weather event, Winter Storm Fern. Interesting name, I think. But Winter Storm Fern this looks like a much better outcome than the last time. What does this look like from your perspective?
You know, every day, every time we have some weather episode, we convene and we talk to our producers, we talk to our pipelines, we talk to the electrical generators to make sure that everybody's kind of jiving and we're talking about any issues that may impede that production of electricity. We did that as a result of Winter Storm Uri. And to me, that's been the biggest number one success we've had in not going without electricity today. I'm so proud of what our producers have done, and not only just weatherization, but the ability to open up and communicate, hey, I may have a well today that I can't get a saltwater hauler to haul off the produced water on, so I can't produce unless I can haul the water off. You know, it's just little things like that, but it's communicated and we're open up and we're sitting across the table from electrical producers. I call it communication. and it was something I had not seen before Winter Storm Uri. So when people ask me, you know, what's the biggest success? Why haven't we gone through that whenever we have these harsh conditions like Winter Storm Uri? It's communication. I mean, that's been the biggest success. But again, it's the industry willing to sit down across the table, you know, and talk to those electrical generators about those issues where there wasn't that communication that existed before whenever Winter Storm Uri occurred. And you're right. You know, I was in office, I think, just about a month whenever Winter Storm Uri hit, and that gave me my first kind of experience in going down to legislation, because you had a lot of people back then that really didn't understand our industry, had a lot of crazy ideas on, you know, how not to, for Winter Storm Uri to occur again. And it took a lot of work from all three commissioners to go down and sit across from legislators and explain to them, this is how it works. And this, you know, what you're thinking about may or may not work. But I just want, you know, the job that I had was to go down and say, you need to understand exactly how we do things before you write down what you think we should be doing. And so I think the result of that legislative session really came out with some good legislation on the weatherization process. You know, I think we could have done maybe a little bit better, and I think we always will continue to do a little bit better. But the one thing I'm very proud of is we haven't been without electricity that I'm aware of. And this last Winter Storm Fern that we just experienced, or kind of still are, you know, we've had 7 or 8 of those events since Winter Storm Uri. They've all been successful. You know, we found ourselves in this last storm to have more natural gas in storage than we've ever seen in history. We've seen that the withdrawal out of that has been massive. That withdrawal, if you equate those numbers, kind of said what held us and what kept us going through this last storm that we're experiencing now was natural gas, electrical generated, or generators that are electrical generators that are producing electricity on natural gas today.
Well, as you and I both know, I mean, that's easily the largest sector of power generation is natural gas. I was proud to sing the praises of gas doing the heavy lifting back then. There were a lot of issues, and the legislature, the commission solved a lot of those. And I'll tell you, I've been on these daily calls with the commission, with operators, with other associations, with pipelines, with
I'm aware. You know,
LDCs.
You represent a lot of our smaller producers that are tied into those molecules that are going to those electrical generators. And you know, your insight on that call that we do every day during these harsh weather conditions is huge, because a lot of your people that are part of the alliance are smaller producers.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, you've got the Permian and its massive gas production. We got a lot of guys in the Panhandle and in North Texas and West Central, kind of our legacy membership areas that are throwing a lot of gas into the mix. And again, those calls just allow the agency to stay on top of what is happening and then relay that to other agencies as well.
But you know, Karr, during Winter Storm Uri, if you really dive into what really happened there, if you look at where the majority of most of our gas comes from today, it comes alongside crude oil production, right? So most of our crude oil production comes out of the Permian, which naturally is a very, less populated area than most other places in Texas. So back in Winter Storm Uri, ERCOT made the wise decision of let's just shed power there around those areas. And with the air rules that came in 2007, everything we do today is pretty much run off electricity. So if you shut the electricity off, it's really hard to produce gas, which is impossible really to produce gas. So
Right.
if you dive down on what happened in Winter Storm Uri, that was really the cause. You can't cut the electricity off. And I think that became, a shining light for our legislation as we came out of Winter Storm Uri.
Right.
So I can't be more proud of the industry, and especially our smaller producers that it's a fight when these come up. It's road conditions. It's getting your water hauled off. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to do, and it's not easy to do, but they're out there doing it every day.
Yep. Well, so you mentioned the smaller producers. I mean, Texas is a state that is blessed to have, first of all, the natural resources. The last time I looked, and it's been a bit, but Texas, 254 counties, there's some reportable, measurable volume of crude oil and or natural gas produced in about 85% of those.
Yeah,
that's
right.
astounding. I don't think most people realize that most of the wells in Texas are smaller wells. Most of the wells in Texas are not located in the Permian. They're legacy wells that have been around for a long time in other parts of the state. And most of them are operated by not the great big companies, are operated by smaller private independents.
I think most of the public, when you think about oil and gas, they think big oil.
Yep.
They don't realize that last numbers I've seen, 77% of our products that come, natural gas and oil, come from smaller producers. That's really what keeps Texas's foundation put together.
That's right. And listen, I am by no means a hater of big oil. It's a big world.
Not at all.
And it takes big companies doing extraordinary things, but our smaller guys, innovative, technology on the cutting edge of that. It's an extraordinary set of companies. And as I like to say in every speech I give, everybody knows great big companies. They know the names: ExxonMobil, Oxy, ConocoPhillips, Chevron.
That's right. That's what most people think of.
And I I always say about the smaller guys, they're great, sophisticated companies, and nobody's ever heard their names before.
Yeah, you're
we're
exactly
protective of them, and we're protective of them in the regulatory sphere, and we appreciate the commission and yours understanding of that landscape.
Yeah, again, I don't think the general public realizes, but most of our oil and gas made in the state, the last numbers I saw were 77% of that was coming from smaller producers that you've never heard of. And that's a huge number.
So you've been through, goodness, I'd have to go, how many legislative sessions? Every other year. It's a different experience. I've been
3, I think.
That should make sense. 6 years and every other year. So 3 of them. I've been involved in legislative sessions before. The 2025 session was the first one I went through as president of the Alliance. And it's just a different game at that position, and certainly from yours. How do you find legislative sessions from a commission standpoint and oil and gas standpoint?
There's always surprises that comes out of the legislative session, in pretty much all aspects. And there's always something that's, around oil and gas production or some of the things that we have authority over. And so, again, it is imperative that we're down in front of them and talking about what the reality is versus what maybe their picture of what goes on out here in the state. And I think that's getting better. I think we've got a good group down there now. If you see what happened in the last legislative session, that has a little better understanding of the oil and gas industry. But it's a big job. It's not just the commissioners going down there and trying to talk through some of the ideas that come out of legislative action, but it's also guys like you. There's a lot of associations out there that have to go down and help do that same thing. So this last legislative session, I think really showed what that success has been. We set up a couple of things and we did it right. It wasn't something that we were having to go down and really explain ourselves through. I think we've done a good job. We continue to do a good job of educating those legislators on exactly how we operate.
Well, we're kind of running out of time, and I expect you and I could do this for a couple of hours, and we probably don't need to. But
I think I said before we got started, I'll ramble on forever.
As will I, I'm afraid. Well, one more subject before we have to shut it down, and then we'll come back and revisit these another time. One of the things that came out of that was the oil field theft task force. It's a growing problem in the state. I'm privileged to be on this task force that you chair. I know why this is important to oil and gas operators. I mean, you're losing product that could be, of course, sold. I mean, that makes sense. Why is this important to the state of Texas?
Well, number one, you know, theft in general, I don't want our state to become a reputation that we have that kind of thing going on here, to me. And then number two, the severance tax revenue that this brings to the state is very important. As I said earlier, it's $27 billion to the state. You know, there's been numbers that I've heard, anywhere from $50 million to $1 billion just in 1 year of theft that we're experiencing. I didn't know that we even had that kind of magnitude going on. You know, setting up that Stop Theft Task Force, I think, is going to go a long way in mitigating what we're seeing happening in Texas and what we've become aware of. I know 6 months ago, if you'd have told me what I know today, I'd have probably doubted that because I didn't realize the magnitude. So I think the Stop Theft Task Force, number one, is going to show everybody in this nation Texas doesn't put up with that kind of thing. And number two, I think it's a great opportunity for us to just go out and really analyze what is going on, how do we fix it, and what has been the impact for the state of Texas, which is part of what the legislation required us to do. Thank God you're on there because your background is tremendous when it comes to economics. And that's the reason I really wanted you to be on it. And thank you for being on there so that you could kind of analyze what has been those impacts as we study and learn more about, you know, how big is this impact for our industry?
Well, I'm with you. I mean, just the short time this task force has been stood up and I've been on it, it's eyes wide open. I had no idea. I mean, we hear about this from our member operators, but the level, the sheer volume, the level of sophistication, the ways in which this happens is extraordinary. And you're not, I mean, you're right. We have to put a stop to this.
Yes, no, we definitely do. And for a lot, you know, for those main two reasons, but for a lot of other reasons too. But I think we've got a really good group assembled on the theft task force. Again, I said it about what we did in Winter Storm Uri. Communication. We're starting to communicate with local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and our federal law enforcement, which had been out there doing a lot of this stuff that we weren't really aware of until we set up this task force. It's amazing to see what they've worked on. I think we have, you know, we've got a challenge ahead of us, but we're going to make a difference before the end of this year.
Okay, one last question. I'll swear this is it. You told me why you ran the first time. Why'd you decide to do it again?
You know, I did not realize that there were so many things that we really need to address and we really put attention to. And 6 years in the political world is not enough time to really accomplish everything. You know, having my own companies and my own business, I could make decisions like this. Politically, decisions don't work like that, regardless of what people believe. It takes a lot. You know, and one thing I can say about politics, it's a huge thought process, so they make sure that we try to roll it out right the first time. That's why that time is so consumable. So in knowing that, I mean, there is still a lot to do. I feel like I'm the person that needs to do that. And that's what really made me decide to run for the second term. You know, I often say I can go home and stay in my barn, you know, but this has been a challenge. It's been exciting, and really and truly the industry's become my family. The people that work at the agency has become my family. I want to do everything I can to make sure that the legacy that I leave is good for Texas.
Mr. Chairman, it's been an honor. Can't thank you enough
for
coming
Karr. Thank you for letting me be here for the first time. It's really an honor to do that.
Well, the pleasure was mine and the pleasure is ours. So again, first ever edition of the Upstream Downlow, the new name of the podcast from the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon.